I want to follow up on one of our previous stories and an unfortunate theme that we've had on the show recently. So I wanted to talk about this because we were talking about what people are doing, to try to deal with the pandemic and to deal with shelter in place orders, to deal with quarantines, all those kinds of things. That's just the world we live in right now, and we have to deal with it. And we have to find creative ways to deal with it. That's how we go forward. That's how we achieve greatness, folks. Again, it's like you take lemons and you make lemonade. Well, I thought, from my perspective, I was pretty excited about the decision that San Diego Comic Con made to go virtual this year, because I haven't gone to San Diego Comic Con in years, and I was like, hey, now I get to attend San Diego Comic Con this year because it's been, gosh, probably 10 years, if not longer, maybe not quite that long. I think maybe 2011 or something like that was the last time I went. But it's like, it's been a long time, and I missed it. I do miss it. I mean, it's a huge convention. It is very corporate now, that's for sure, and that's going back many years. But I still enjoy it, and I enjoy. To this day, I've enjoyed getting all the news from Comic Con, like watching presentations. New trailers will usually come out. I'll watch a lot of the panels. And I felt like, hey, this is kind of cool. They're going to be doing this virtual convention. Well, maybe not. So Cosmic Book News, they have this article here. This was posted just yesterday. And the headline reads, Marvel Studios, DC, sitting out of Comic-Con at home. So it says, despite having a slew of upcoming content, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios are said to be sitting out of the upcoming Comic-Con at home virtual convention. Marvel.com recently released the Marvel schedule for the Comic-Con. So that's Marvel.com. So you have to understand that's basically the comics division. It said it didn't include anything from Marvel Studios, and now Deadline offers a further update. Quote, we hear Marvel is sitting on the sidelines. That's from Deadline. No specific reason has been given why Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige have chosen not to promote anything at the virtual con, which runs at the end of July. And it says maybe Marvel Studios will hold its own virtual con. It says Feige could have promoted the upcoming Black Widow movie, which, by the way, he says is in desperate need of promotion. I'm not sure what that's about. But he also mentions the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series was supposed to premiere on Disney Plus next month, which I didn't realize that. And he says Feige could have given an update on its filming process, which has been shut down due to the coronavirus. So I don't know what's going on with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This would have been a good opportunity to let us know what's going on. Likewise, WandaVision and Loki are also coming to Disney Plus, but for whatever reason, Feige isn't promoting them. Also talks about Eternals and Shang-Chi. They're also in the pipeline, have started filming. So maybe Feige could have showed snippets of footage of that. So the author says, perhaps Marvel Studios will hold its own virtual convention, similar to what Warner Brothers is doing with the DC Fandom virtual convention next month. And that's something that Dave and I have already covered. We've talked about the DC Fandom. And, my take on it was, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that DC is not supporting San Diego Comic-Con in sort of its darkest hour. We've talked a little bit about, the whole situation with Diamond in DC, the fact that they've got rid of Diamond. And, we've also talked about what's happening with like AMC and Universal, AMC theaters, where it seems like Universal is really sort of punching on them, and Warner Brothers kind of got into it also with Scoob. They didn't show Scoob at any theaters, and they released it, VOD only. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about all this, Dave. It's sounding like the big heavy hitters are not going to be involved with Comic-Con this year. What do you think about that, Dave?
Well, I'm not too terribly surprised. This is not the first time that, for example, like Marvel has set out, San Diego Comic-Con or Comic-Con International. Marvel's made I remember several years ago, and they were doing the Marvel Nights line. They made a whole point about the idea that they were going to sit San Diego out. And they've done that before in the past and made big fanfare out of it. And then they'll do something weird where it's like, they're not really there, but here's Odin's throne. I don't understand the logic in it. This time I understand the logic in it because there isn't really quote unquote a physical convention, but then the it gets into this point. It's like, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you participate in this? Because it's a huge opportunity to, market and present your films and your products or whatever, to such a, in a sense, sort of like a captive audience, and a potentially unlimited audience this time. Normally, we get updates from the floor of San Diego of things that are happening from people that are reporting, the various news sites and what have you. But in this context, I mean, this could be an almost unlimited thing, depending upon how many people decide to tune in, and see what's going on. But there's also this weird thing about exclusivity. And I think that's what we're seeing here. DC with their event, they're trying to do exclusivity and focus only on what DC's doing. And then so Marvel sounds like that they may later on down the road do the same thing, exclusivity. There's a lot of people that were theorizing that this was going to happen eventually anyway because of D23, that eventually D23, which is Disney's convention, was going to get all the big Marvel announcements and stars anyhow. So I feel like that to an extent, there is a percentage of COVID creating unique opportunities, but also too, I think COVID is forcing, well, not forcing, it's sort of causing companies to, do things on a faster timeline than maybe they would have originally had intended to do. So, because there's been talk for years about the idea of, because, Marvel pulling out in total from the, San Diego Comic-Con. And there's also been talk that DC would, which is crazy to me because, they're such a sort of a signpost, for when you do the convention. They usually have such a big booth. Everyone, you use the DC booth to help navigate, meeting up with people and planning out your convention experience. So, I'm not too surprised at this because of what's going on. But along those lines, like I said, I'm not also surprised at it too, because I think some of this was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right as far as sort of the trend. I think it's completely and totally short sighted because when you talk about exclusivity, especially when you're talking about the virtual world, I just don't know how that's going to work because to me, the thing that's really cool about Comic Con is that there are so many things going on. So what you get is you get a lot of sort of cross promotion. So you've got the anime people there, but they're still, kind of paying attention to what, is going on as far as Marvel and DC and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. You can't know everything. I mean, it's impossible at San Diego Comic Con to know everything that's going on, but certainly with the big, the really big franchises and things like that, you're still going to hear things, and the stuff gets in the news cycle, and it's this big kind of event. I don't know if you're going to get that doing your own. In fact, I'm going to predict it. You're not. It's just not. It's not going to happen when you're that specialized, because now with like DC fandom, they're not going to get the Marvel people at all. They're not going to be paying attention. I don't think that their ears are even going to be open. So I think even just from a business perspective, this is terribly short-sighted. I do think you're right, Dave. The writing was on the wall even before the pandemic, as far as that this was kind of going to be the trend that, like you mentioned, the Disney event, D23, things like that like maybe people were trying to model it more like that. I think it's a terribly short-sighted thing. I really do. I think that the San Diego Comic-Con event, it really cannot be compared to anything. I mean, it's just massive in scale. Even other large Comic Cons, you really can't compare it to San Diego Comic Con, especially what it's become now, for better or worse, specifically with the movie studios, because so much movie news comes out of that event. So I don't know. I think it's terribly short-sighted, and I think it's really disloyal, because San Diego Comic Con really needs the studios right now, needs them to kind of support their event. Kind of needs that content to maintain relevancy, and all these guys, it looks like they're just backing up, backing out and saying, well, you can't do the real event, so we're just going to do our own little virtual thing, and yeah, the question becomes, how do you put that all back together again? I don't know. I think that they're really going to be causing some friction in their future business dealings. And I would imagine, San Diego bounces back next year. They're going to remember some of this. At least I hope they will. Who knows? Maybe that will help them actually get more back into comics and less centered on the studio. So maybe there's a silver lining in all this. We'll see, right?
Yeah, we'll see. And like I said, to me, like a lot of this was just the writing on the wall. I think a lot of this is going to happen anyway. I think all COVID did was just sort of accelerate the timetable. And yeah, I agree with you, Eric. I do think it is short-sighted, but there's all kinds of stuff like that going on right now. And I'm curious to see, what the comic industry looks like when we get on the other side. If we're able to feel, relatively confident about what's going on by the fall, I think things could stay kind of mostly the same. But if we get into the fall and we still got some issues going on, I think we could be looking at a completely different landscape, not just the convention circuit, but I think just within the comic book industry in general. So
yeah, I agree. Although I would say when it comes to the comic book industry, my personal opinion is a lot of changes are long overdue in the comic industry, and there's a lot of weaknesses in the comic industry that have been really further, shown by the pandemic. In other words, those flaws were already there. I mean, it's always been problematic to have only one distributor in comics. That's something that I think was always a bad thing. Anytime you have a monopoly, I'm just really not for it. And I think I think it ultimately hurts the consumer. I think it hurts the small businesses. I don't know. I mean, so but on this side, when we talk about the convention industry, the convention industry was working really well. I remember when Phoenix didn't have a Comic-Con. I remember when we didn't have a big convention. Now we have one of the biggest, which, by the way, they were delayed as well. That was actually some news, I think, from last week that the Phoenix Comic-Con, which is now Phoenix Fan Fusion, they canceled the event this year because initially they postponed it, and now it's canceled. So the Comic-Con industry, if you will, the all these personal appearances, it's exploded. I mean, I don't think anybody would have anticipated, back like when I was a kid, you did not see like top tier, A-list celebrities like Chris Evans. You didn't see them at conventions. Now you do. Now they go to conventions. You know what I mean? So it's like that industry is kind of exploded. Right now, it's kind of in a bad situation because these conventions aren't happening. But I think eventually they will again, and I'm curious to see how that's all going to pan out when they realize so many of these, studios and things like that really bailed on them in their time of need. So we just have to see how that pans out.
It'd be definitely interesting to see. And like I said, unfortunately, the studios bailing on the cons, that this kind of stuff happens. So we'll just have to see. Like I said, for me, I am most interested to see what the industry looks like on the other side, and only time will tell.